Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow. With you for the next 60 minutes. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You could also hit us up on Giants Chat using the hashtag, of course, prior to that. And you can also send in your comments directly to us at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. A reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So Howard Cross and I were on yesterday's program. We had reviewed the latest transactions. Since then, the Giants have made 3 additions, so I want to start there, and then, Paul, we could get some reaction from you in terms of what has already transpired. But the Giants, they added a veteran quarterback, and you and I, we did 2 shows, right, on that position alone.
Yes, we did.
Joe Schoen made sure to point this out before the offseason even started. They have to address the position in some capacity. So Tyrod Taylor winds up signing with the Jets to back up Aaron Rodgers. So he was no longer an option to come back. But they got Drew Lock, who was on the Seahawks roster last year, has had some fill-in opportunities for Geno Smith. He actually got into the Giants game on Monday Night Football this past season and actually played very well when Geno was sidelined for a little bit, including a short touchdown pass that Seattle had in the first half. He started his career with Denver. So here's an individual that fits the bill of what I was talking about. You want to bring in somebody that has several years of experience, but also has many starts under his belt. 23 starts over his 5 seasons in the league with Denver and Seattle. And interestingly, I mean, this is just a little bit of a nugget. The Giants now have 2 members of the 2019 draft class on the roster because Drew Lock was part of the same draft class as Daniel Jones. He was 42nd overall in the second round. And, of course, Daniel Jones was 6th overall. But certainly Lock is an individual, like I said, that gives some veteran experience to a room that is young and a little bit of the unknown due to injuries.
Look, we talked about that shoebox or that shelf on the store where you would look at a young, experienced backup quarterback. We did 2 shows. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We did virtually 2 full shows on the different possibilities and the different ways the Giants could go. Whether or not you wanted Trubisky, or you wanted Locke, or you wanted Mason Rudolph is a guy who I actually thought also would be someone who would be on my radar.
Yeah.
Mariota was another one. Minshew, although maybe he's got a few more wins under his belt. Maybe he's a tad higher than that shoebox. But this was exactly the kind of guy we talked about philosophically that made sense for the Giants because they're backing Daniel Jones, and now what they've really done is they've said, okay, we're going to play roulette with Daniel Jones. Either he's healthy and he's going to be terrific, or if the rehab doesn't work out well, then we've got to have an insurance policy. So to me, Daniel Jones is the roulette wheel, black or red, right? Because his health is the one thing that could move the ball from black to red. Now you go to the blackjack table in the casino, okay, and you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play 21. And I got two aces. I'm splitting them. You've now helped your possibilities because on one hand, at the roulette table, you're betting on Daniel Jones to come up healthy. And if it doesn't work out, you're now at the blackjack table and you're betting on Brian Daboll and his ability, based on his resume, of having great success with quarterbacks, to take a young, experienced veteran who has done a few things in this league, who came into the NFL as a projected number 1 draft pick, although he wound up slipping to early in the second round, but a guy who was highly, highly touted for his arm and his frame and his size. This is a guy who was very much liked. Also, he's very astute. He's a smart quarterback. He's a rhythm, timing quarterback as well. And you're saying, well, I'm betting on the roulette wheel with Daniel Jones, and now I'm betting on the blackjack table with Brian Daboll. So I've now doubled my chances to win. Because if Daniel Jones doesn't get healthy and do what he's supposed to do, I've now got a young prospect of a rookie, not a rookie, but a young prospect of a quarterback who I believe that Brian Daboll is going to be able to bring out the best in him if necessary and potentially make him my next guy. So you've doubled your bet. You've now played the roulette table and you've played blackjack. And of course, to your point about keeping a third quarterback, now it might even make more sense to do that. Because now that you've got Locke, quote, locked in, maybe you just say, look, Tommy DeVito, you are going to be the third quarterback on the 53. We're not going to expose you to waivers. Maybe you decide that he's going to get scapped up. We'll just keep him on the 53. And because of the uncertainty involving either Jones's health or Locke's productivity, maybe you're comfortable with Tommy DeVito as the third quarterback on your 53, and you don't even play with trying to get him onto the practice squad. That's how I see things this morning right now.
Well, if they draft a quarterback, and we've had these conversations.
He's got to be on the 53.
He's on the 53. And then you have to expose Tommy DeVito, and you see whether or not you can bring him back to the practice squad.
So now the question becomes, do you take a fourth-round quarterback or a fifth-round quarterback who will have, quote, higher upside than a Tommy DeVito, or do you just stick with Tommy DeVito and say, you know what? I'm not going to bother drafting a quarterback at all. Maybe I'm just going to keep piling on to the line. I'm going to add a couple extra corners. I'm going to add another offensive lineman. I'm going to add another defensive lineman. Maybe you just load up on other positions and don't even worry about the quarterback. Maybe you got your three quarterbacks already in the house.
Well, I think for this season, to answer your question, Paul, I think you have three quarterbacks because Locke definitely changes the dynamics of that room because your thinking is...
Well, he's only a 5-year pro.
Correct. He's an insurance policy, but there's potential that if he does get an opportunity, you could bring him back. However...
Yeah, he could be part of the future.
However...
If you need him.
Based on reports, considering it's a 1-year contract, I don't think, based on that structure, that it really changes the thinking of the Giants. Meaning, if they want to take a quarterback with the 6th overall pick, the Locke contract does not prevent them from going in that direction.
It does
because he's not on the books long term.
It does not. However, I highly believe that that's unlikely to happen.
And I'm not saying that it's more likely or less likely. I don't think it changes things drastically. I guess I would not read so much into the Locke signing and say, oh, that means the Giants have no interest in looking at a quarterback high. I mean, you could very well say Drew Lock is your insurance policy this year, and simultaneously you're developing a young quarterback. You could do both of those things.
Oh, you could.
Together in 2024.
Again, for me, I think if they do take a quarterback, it's going to be late. I don't think they're taking one at 6. I think it's quite apparent right now if you look at the Giants' two most gaping needs. Because, folks, let's recap the last few days. It appears that they have gotten 2 functional offensive linemen. They've gotten a dynamic pass rusher. They've gotten a young backup quarterback. They've overhauled their running backs room. They've gotten an experienced guy in the secondary to help out with depth there. Where are the 2 most glaring needs? It's pretty obvious. Big play wide receiver and potential starting corner. It's obvious. Where are the 2 deepest parts of this draft? Wide receiver and also cornerback. Now, if you want a big play wide receiver, everybody seems to believe you got to get one of those 3. I'm just doing the math, folks. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? I mean, the draft is what you do after you fill most of your holes in free agency. And now, you go after value, best player available, and if it happens to match a need, well, Rome Odunze is just sitting out there on the table for you. Or maybe Neighbors. Either one. It just seems so apparently obvious to me.
Well, and they'll be in position, you would think, to get one of those offensive playmakers as opposed to not necessarily being in position to get the quarterback that they would want if they stay pat at 6. See, that's a big difference. I don't think you're settling on a wide receiver if you select one of those guys at 6. Quarterback, you could be settling if a few of those guys are off the board.
Well, yeah, because everybody believes that the top 3 have to go in the top 3.
Sure, but
and that the next
you may
guy
not look at those guys, though, as the top 3, too.
Well,
keep in mind.
Again, we don't know how the Giants feel, but the overall general consensus seems to be top 3 picks or top 3 quarterbacks, and that's the end of that. And the 4th quarterback is going to be down the road a bit. I know that there are some people, they're in the minority, who think that McCarthy should be the 4th quarterback and he should be a top 10 guy. I don't see it, and I certainly don't see him at 6. To me, it's obvious. The value at wide receiver between Odunze and Neighbors far exceeds the value of McCarthy as a quarterback. I don't think that's much of a question for me at all. Then again, I don't get paid to make that decision.
Well, listen, there's room for them to go in a variety of different directions at 6. I don't read much into one particular move in free agency. Also, you know my feelings, Paul, about the draft. It's not just about 2024. It's about beyond that, too.
There's a couple of names that are flashing up on TV right now. Guys like Garoppolo, Joshua Dobbs. Those are those guys who'd be in that shoebox that we were talking about.
Sure. Well, I mean, but the fact that they brought in Drew Lock now.
They got the guy they wanted.
I would say it's highly unlikely because you just don't have the financial flexibility to make another move.
I was simply saying those were the other guys in the shoebox. Well, they got the guy they wanted, and it's great.
Sure.
And it's great. It alleviates another issue.
And keep this in mind, too. Several of the guys we talked about, got pretty good money. Whereas, and once again, they gave Drew Lock, according to reports, a 1-year deal. We don't need to get into the finances in that $5 million ballpark, perhaps. But, I mean, Darnold got a 1-year deal for $10 million. Okay, Brissett got $8 million. Mariota got $6 million. These guys were not going for cheap on the free agent market.
Taylor was reported to get a 2-year deal from the Jets for more than he got from the Giants 2 years ago.
Yeah. What was it, I think $9 million a year or something like that?
That's one of the reports that I saw.
So, you could understand why the Giants, they may have wanted Taylor back, but they said to themselves, $9 million a year, that's a lot of money to wrap up for an insurance policy.
Sure it is.
And you get younger with Drew Lock. So I can understand the logic and the thinking, but...
Well, I want to say Tyrod Taylor's number for the Giants last year was 6, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
So in reality...
6 versus 9...
How about the fact that he was 6 and Drew Lock is only 5?
And Drew's younger.
And more healthy.
Yeah. Well, and you would think, wouldn't the younger, healthier guy get the better contract? But
the thing is, Drew Lock had a rougher start to his career.
Sure.
He is more unproven, does not have the wins and the pedigree that a Tyrod Taylor has. But again, you could look at it that Drew Lock may be a late bloomer. And if you believe in Brian Daboll's quarterback guruship, if you will, I just created a word, like Belichickian guruship, right? If you believe in that, then you believe that potentially, if necessary, Daboll can make something out of that guy.
Keep in mind, Drew Lock, interestingly, has followed a very similar path to Daniel Jones, removing the injury history, though. He had a revolving door of coaches and play callers in Denver.
No doubt.
I mean, that's a big reason why I don't think he ever got to his potential. I mean, just to bring it up, Fangio was the head coach in 2019, his rookie year. Rich Scangarello was the offensive coordinator. Then, 2020, Fangio changes to Pat Shurmur. And then in 2021, Shurmur is still there. But then what happens in 2022? Nathaniel Hackett comes in. And remember, he didn't even last the season. And, of course, they made the trade. But he had 2 coordinators in the span of his first 3 seasons in the NFL, and he wasn't on the field consistently. Not an excuse, just the reality of the circumstance. And who do I use as the perfect model? Alex Smith. I mean, Alex went through, 7 coordinators in 8 years?
Yeah.
Now, that's rare. Normally, guys don't get that much leeway, Paul. Their careers are done. But I think that contributed to why maybe Drew Lock didn't click immediately in terms of his career.
Look, here's the one thing you want to say about him, and you can say about him. You want to, but you can't always say it. He's got the physical tools to play.
Sure, yeah.
He's got the size, the frame, the strength, the arm strength, throws a good ball.
Yep.
Those are, if you know physically the guy has the talent and the skills and the tools to succeed, well, now it's all the other stuff that you have to work with that may not have been in place and forced him to try to be a late bloomer. But, hey, you know me. I'm still in Daniel Jones's camp. And I still think that Daniel's going to be able to come back healthy, and he's going to do a fine job, and he'll hold down the starting role, and they won't necessarily have a need for the backup guy. I'm still on the roulette wheel myself.
Sure.
But this blackjack table that's been thrown into the room certainly helps the Giants situation.
Well, because you just can't afford to go into this season.
Correct. Which Joe Shane has
Daniel
said.
Jones is going to stay healthy.
And he found his insurance policy.
Two other recent transactions that the Giants made in addition to Drew Lock takes us to the defensive side of the ball. They brought in veteran safety Jalen Mills, who also has a lot of experience as a corner, familiar name in the NFC East because he started his career with the Eagles, spent the last 3 seasons with the Patriots, 5 years with Philadelphia. Similar to Nick McLeod, where he's interchangeable. He can play corner, he can play safety, and you lose Xavier McKinney to the Green Bay Packers, and we talked about you got younger guys now on the depth chart, including Belton and Owens. You do have Jason Pinnock. So here's a guy you bring into camp. He competes, and if you have injuries in any of those positions, he holds value because you can emphasize we want to use you as a safety, or we want to emphasize and use you as a corner. Plus, of course, he's a special teams guy as well.
Well, when you're talking about a new defensive coordinator for the Giants, in terms of using deception as opposed to pressure to try to give offenses trouble, well, this is the kind of guy who fits into that scheme because you're looking at the versatility and the opportunity to play all over the field. Played mostly safety with the Patriots the last few years, but a guy who, by his own admission, has played nickel linebacker, strong safety, free safety, and cornerback. Known as the Green Goblin for his braids and the green that he dyes in his hair.
Yep.
We don't have any Spider-Man at MetLife Stadium that I know of, so we'll see if he can fly around and make some plays for the Giants. But this is a guy who is a great locker room guy. I already did some intel on him. I am told he is very outgoing. He is very gregarious. He's got a very pleasant personality, always energized and prodding his teammates to do better at all times. He's a real rah-rah cheerleader type. You know, I'm guessing probably a lot like what Sterling Shepard has been for this team for the last several years. So you're looking at a fellow who isn't just, in the Giants' minds, a versatile skill set, but also an intangible that I believe they think can be useful to this team, especially given the fact that the secondary is really young.
Yeah, well, that's why, there's value in bringing in a safety who has that level of experience when you lose somebody like McKinney. At least you protect yourself because what do we talk about, Paul? Belton looked good in the later stages of last season, but sample size is tiny. You can't guarantee that that's going to happen for 17 games, and Owens was a special teamer last season.
Yeah.
So you don't really know a lot about the young guys at that position, right?
Well, if you want to go into recent Giants history, right, Bobby McCain was signed to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Remember Leon Hall?
Sure, from the Bengals.
He was signed to be that guy.
But he wasn't a special teamer guy.
He wasn't a special teamer guy.
Sometimes he was inactive as a result.
But he was brought in late to be that guy to help out in the secondary. How about R.W. McQuarters, who had been a corner and a special teamer and then became a safety, and they brought him in the 2007 season, and he was a rover back there helping out the secondary. There have been a number of times where the Giants in years past have gone after a guy like this to help enhance the room.
Plus, you talking about how corner is still a need, and I would agree with you. You know, maybe if they don't get what they need in free agency, chips don't fall the way in the draft. I know he's played safety recently, but at least you have an option.
And he's 6
for
feet
a veteran
tall.
Corner, correct?
He's got some size.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that to me could be
I like
good, too.
McLeod out there myself.
Man, that's
Between
fine,
the two of them, I put McLeod out there first. And there are so many corners in this draft. They should be able to get at least a couple.
Well, but once again, is he going to be ready, though, to go out there and perform? Because
Again,
remember, you got Deonte Banks on the other side who's a young guy, too.
Yeah.
So how comfortable do you feel in having two young guys as opposed to maybe working in a veteran? Isaiah McKenzie was the other addition, another great special teamer. I mean, the man's got a wealth of experience as a punt returner and a kickoff returner. He reminds me of Wan'Dale Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Stylistically, size-wise, I don't want to say he's a duplication of Wan'Dale, but he's got that jitterbug, that term that you like to call.
He's a slot gadget player.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how much they'll utilize him on offense. That remains to be seen, keep in mind. But you figure he could definitely compete with Gunnar Olszewski as a return man, and he could be somebody given certain plays or groupings, personnel-wise, that they turn to as an offensive weapon who can also be utilized out of the backfield. They utilize him as a runner in addition to lining up as receiver.
Well, if you just want to overlay with some onion paper the Giants wide receiver depth chart over last year's, right? You'll figure we know Sterling Shepard, we believe, is going to retire. Campbell is not coming back. He was on a one-year deal.
Yep.
So you have room to draft a wide receiver at number 6, and that can be whatever the rookie turns out to be. And then if you put McKenzie into Shepard's spot, you've now filled up your wide receiver room.
Well, but if they draft somebody,
well, they could also. Well, again, there could be competition.
Sure.
But I'm saying at the very least, if you don't come out with any other wide receivers, those are your receivers, right? I mean, you could go into a game with that as your wide receiver room, could you not?
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Absolutely. But remember, Campbell didn't get a lot of opportunities last season. So somebody's going to be on the outside looking in.
Well, in terms of snaps,
yeah,
absolutely. Because if Odunze or Neighbors get drafted at 6, they are going to play.
Correct. Well, because he becomes the 4th guy with the other 3 you named, and then the tight ends.
I'm simply talking about the slots in the room, the chairs in the room, if you will. I'm not telling you how they're going to be deployed. I'm simply saying that there were 2 spots on the roster at wide receiver during the entire 2023 campaign, Shepard and Campbell. Those 2 spots need to be replaced. Do you want to replace them with one of the reserve guys that are on the team right now? Do you want to replace them with rookies who are drafted? Do you want to replace them with free agents? Well, I'm telling you now, if you draft a rookie at 6, that's one of the spots. And McKenzie could very well be the other. And maybe somebody else gets beaten out. Who knows? But he would be a backup slot to Robinson, which, you could make a case that's kind of what Shepard was. He didn't get a chance to play a whole lot, but he was kind of the backup to Robinson last year.
Well, and remember, Robinson suffered a torn ACL not too long ago, so it's good to have insurance because you don't know whether or not he'll hold up as well. So I think, once again, there's value to this, but I like his special teams experience because
he's a better kickoff returner than Olszewski. Olszewski was told on kickoff returns, fair catch. Don't even run it back. Let it go or fair catch. They did not feel comfortable with him on kickoff returns. Wow. They loved him on punts, and justifiably so. 94 yards for a touchdown against the Rams. Great. I think he's a terrific punt return guy. For some reason, he's not really a kickoff return guy. And by telling him to fair catch everything that he could catch, they're telling you the same thing. McKenzie is a legit kickoff return guy, averaged over 22 yards a kickoff return.
Yeah, they're going to give him the green light.
Of course, there were
Olszewski.
Not a lot of kickoff returns in the game anymore, but
no, but you know what? Hey, just like when you least suspected, Olszewski took advantage of the Rams missing 100 tackles.
Right.
You never know. And that could very well be the difference between a win or a loss on the season. McKenzie also has connections to Brian Dable and Joe Shane. They were together in Buffalo, so he and Devin Singletary continue this Buffalo reunion theme that we've seen since Dable and Joe Shane came to East Rutherford, New Jersey. So those are the latest 3 additions to the roster, and we could also get a little bit into some of the previous additions as well, but we'll open up the phone lines. A few reminders, though, before we head to the lines. The Giants Huddle podcast, you can check that out. Favorite podcast platform, go to giants.com/podcast. As we look ahead to the 2024 campaign, take your fandom to the next level. Season ticket membership, stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV, it brings you original video content, game highlights on demand, and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here. We check in with Jason in New Haven. Jason, welcome to BBKL. What do you got for us?
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
Good. All right. What's on your mind?
Good. I haven't heard the show in a while, but the free agency I liked. I want to say, good luck to Barkley and McKinney. They were 2 good Giants. I can't blame either. I know a lot of fans are probably upset, but you know how I am. These guys only have a finite window to make their money. So, God bless them for getting every single dime they could. So I have nothing bad to say about those two.
Jason, they both got a Godfather offer. You know what that is? That's an offer you can't refuse.
Absolutely.
Those offers were absolutely blowing people out of the water. And to be frank with you, you'd have to be literally like, I don't even want to say how ridiculously in a coma you would have to have been to turn down either one of those contracts. I mean, they were from Mars, those two contracts. So,
absolutely.
You know what? That's it. What can you say? We always said, while I always believed that Barkley would be back, I never thought that another team would actually offer such a wild deal. And that's a wild deal.
All it takes is one.
Wow.
Wow, yeah, that was a big deal. And, the other part of that is I'm with Shane, or Joe Shane. And where we're at right now, I just never saw us paying $26 million guaranteed for Barkley at 27, and then another $17 million a year for a safety. And while McKinney was a good safety, it's not like, no disrespect to him, but it wasn't like we're losing a Kenny Phillips or a Antrell Roll or or one of the all-time great safeties. He was good, but I think we'll be okay with him. And Shane, this is not revisionist history. I'm not knocking any previous administrations, and I'm not knocking Barkley. I rooted for him every Sunday. He was a Giant, and I'll have good memories of him. But Shane is just doing what needed to be done. In my opinion, Barkley, and this is not to knock anybody, but Barkley was the wrong pick. That's just my opinion. He was the wrong pick that year, number 2 overall. We weren't a running back away from winning anything. So I applaud Shane for just righting that wrong, in my opinion.
Well, it's his vision of the team now. I mean, remember, he didn't draft Saquon Barkley, and he can now take this team in a different direction as he pleases.
Right.
And I think the indication is he wants to take resources and invest them in other areas of the team, such as the offensive line and pass rusher. And he has every right to do that. And I think most teams, if you look at the blueprint, they realize those are the areas you have to win, especially in this division.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Lance, you did a good point of segueing into my next point was I thought the Burns trade was a knockout the park. I know I've talked to you, Lance, and you, Paul, about we need to get back to our DNA. Our pass rush and our offensive line the last few years just hasn't been what we have been used to. And to get a 25-year-old pass rusher who I remember his days in Florida State, very athletic, can bend the corner, and is a pretty, he's not an all-world run defender, but he's a pretty good run defender. I thought was a knockout of park for a second-round pick and a fifth. Now people say, oh, well, we gave him that big extension. Listen,
well, you had to.
You're gonna have to.
I mean, he was a free
agent.
agent.
You have to pay. You have to pay to get some talent in this organization. And with him and Big Dex in the middle and Kayvon, I mean, I'm over the moon right now to see what. Now, of course, they have to prove it on the field, but I'm over the moon to just see those three work. And then the last point, the offensive line. I thought they were really good pickups. If I'm not mistaken, I know you guys are not big PFF guys, but if I'm not mistaken, Runyon was in the top 10 in terms of metrics or pass protection, and I think it's safe to say that Dabo kind of wants to throw the ball, and then Illuminor has some position flexibility where I personally think he's going to start at guard. That's just my opinion.
He could. He's played guard before.
It's possible.
Yeah, but if Neal, I think this is a wake up call for Neal, and I've been kind of hard on him. I know he's had some injuries and maybe some coaching, maybe some disconnection with coaching that we've had. This needs to light a spark in him. You were the seventh overall pick that year. We picked him up, and we need to see some. We need to see some stuff on the field. So I think, and we paid him a good amount. I think it was $7 million a year. We're giving Illuminor, and then the rest of the free agents were just out of the park. And in the draft, and I'll get off the air. I'm at the point right now, fellas. It's receiver or trade down. I don't see us trading up unless one of those Caleb or well, that's the only guy I would really trade up for, and he'd have to fall, and I don't see that happening. And then the receivers, Rome or Neighbors, which I've mentioned numerous times, I like. And personally, I think we're at a good spot where Shane has kind of hit every little thing we've needed. We needed a backup quarterback. I like Drew Lock. We needed some receiver help. McKenzie is not a big name, but he's some depth. We needed a safety. We got Mills. Not an all-world safety, but he's some veteran depth. And the 2 linemen we picked up.
Well, yeah,
So
because,
like
the goal in the draft is you don't want to have to force yourself into a position. And appreciate the phone call, Jason. Thanks for giving us a ring.
We don't even need to do a show now. He just did such a great job of logically assessing what the Giants have done. We could just pack up and go home.
Well,
great job, Jason. That was an outstanding phone call. Educated, reasonable, logical. You explained it beautifully. And I'll tell you, Illuminor, he'd been a target for me since the day they hired Brasillo. I had said it on this program.
No, they go back. Yeah.
It made perfect sense. And oh, by the way, what about all that stuff you read that the Raiders offensive lineman supposedly did not like Brasillo? You remember reading that in the papers?
I did not see that.
Some of the beat guys were writing that Brasillo was very much disliked with the Raiders, and there were rumblings. Sources said that the Giants got a guy who really rubbed players the wrong way.
Oh.
But what happened? One of his guys from the Raiders, who apparently is thrilled to death, if you read his Twitter, about being with the Giants, came over and followed Brasillo. So what does that tell you about these great sources that we've all heard about?
Well, I'll give you another example.
Great job.
Darius Slay was on the Eagles last season. They brought in Matt Patricia as a consultant, and then he took on a larger role eventually as defensive coordinator. Patricia and Slay didn't necessarily see eye to eye in Detroit when Patricia was the head coach. And I know the Eagles season didn't end the way it wanted, but the Eagles still made the playoffs and won a lot of football games last season.
I'm not talking about the Eagles. I'm talking about this particular storyline that was floated out there as a big deal, and it's not, and it was obviously not true.
You misunderstood my point. I'm saying that was another example of people making a big deal about relationships, and it turned out to be okay. They didn't kill each other. They were able to coexist, and they played football. So
Illuminor
I think people read into that too much.
Illuminor will provide competition for Neal at right tackle. That's the beauty of this.
Yeah.
He can provide competition, and at the very least, if Neal beats him, then God bless. The best man won, right? And then he becomes the backup. Or he gets into the competition at guard potentially, and maybe gets a spot there. The beauty of this, and Runyon, you're right. By the way, Runyon's a better pass protector than he is a power run blocker. It does kind of show that Giants are probably going to be a little more pass-oriented as we move forward. Obviously, with the way they move with the running backs, too. They're going to go by committee. They're not going to
they can still run the football, whether they have a committee or one guy. I really don't think that makes a difference.
I don't think we're looking at a power run game this year. I think they're clearly going to be gearing a little more toward the pass. But having said that, the Giants are in a spot where they really are setting themselves up to put the best 5 offensive linemen on the field. That's really what it comes down to now, because Illuminor provides so much flexibility that he could be a tackle or a guard. And it's like, well, where do you need him most? And he's going to be able to plug in there. They will put their best 5 starting offensive linemen on the field. This was such a valuable signing, and it's why that, for me, he was my first target on the offensive line. I know they went and they got Runyon first, but Illuminor, to me, provided that plug and play wherever you need them, flexibility that was incredibly valuable to me.
Though I think ideally you want to find one spot for him as opposed to moving him around, because then all of a sudden you're going to have guys lining up next to different people here or there. I think you want to avoid that.
What does that have to do with anything? If he wins the tackle spot, that's where he plays. If he wins the guard spot, that's where he plays.
No, but they also may obviously have a competition during training camp.
Well, there should be.
Realistic.
There should be.
So therefore, you're going to have Neal next to a guard. You're going to have Illuminor next to a guard. There are going to be some interchangeable parts.
There will be at the beginning.
Would figure. Yeah.
And so, by the time they decide who wins what, you'll know who the starting 5 are going to be.
Sure, but you want to keep it that way is what I'm saying.
Oh, you hope so.
For then...
You hope
the majority of the season.
You hope nobody gets hurt. Please. Yeah. Nobody get hurt this year. Please.
Well, but to your point, he has experience in both spots. But I've said this all the time. Daniel Jones and Evan Neal are in the same position. I don't really think it's a matter of bringing somebody in to light a fire under them. You'd be naive if you think those guys don't realize they have to stay healthy. They have to stay on the field.
Well, Thomas doesn't need the fire, but Neal has had injuries.
You're talking about
and as
DJ. You're talking about Thomas? Who are you referring to?
I thought you were talking about the two tackles.
No, I'm talking about Daniel Jones and Evan
Oh,
Neal.
no. Daniel Jones doesn't need a fire. Thomas doesn't need a fire. Neal has been inconsistent, and he's been hurt.
Well, but I think he
and
realizes
you need to
that.
bring in competition.
No, but what I'm saying is that I don't think Illuminor all of a sudden opens his lens to a point where he realizes...
it makes that competition a whole lot more real when there's a 300-plus pounder sitting in the locker room next to you.
Sure, but Neal also, I think, over his first 2 seasons, hasn't proven that he could stay on the field, and he's got to do that. And if you don't stay on the field, you can easily lose a job.
With all due respect to Matthew Perrott and to Tyree Phillips, both of them have been nicked up. And trust me, starters who may be a little bit sketchy, when they know that the backups really can't challenge and seize the job behind them, that registers psychologically.
Well,
Trust me, the Illuminor signing needs to get Evan Neal's attention. And if he doesn't pay attention to that, he's making a sad mistake.
No, and I don't think he's overlooking that. I'm just saying that I think if you ask Evan Neal, given his struggle to even stay on the field, forget his performance, you have to come to the realization you can't continue this trend because the team cannot rely on you if you can't stay on the field. It's the same thing with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones didn't need to see another veteran come in. He understands if he can't stay on the field, they have to pursue other options.
No doubt.
So that's why I see the same thing for both of those players.
Now it gets real is what I'm telling you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Joe is in Pennsylvania joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Joe?
Oh, what's happening? Drama. You can't write these scripts, what's happening here with the Giants. You know, it's really, really exciting times again, and hopefully it can work out. Now, where that last caller said maybe Barkley wasn't the right pick at number 2 there or so when we drafted him. Well, maybe he was, and maybe we would have gave him that contract, Paul, if the offensive line would have worked out years ago. It never did when we had to take that tackle from New England, and we used all the assets to the offensive line, but it never came in place. So if it would have came in place, we'd have been able to put assets somewhere else besides always the offensive line, and we're still hoping today to get the offensive line going.
You know what the problem is, Joe? Honestly, the problem is no matter how good your plan is, if the results don't follow, regardless of the reasons, people get all bent out of shape and get very angry and then scream bloody holy high hell and tell you how dumb you were.
Well,
and that's the shame of it, because going into this past off season last year, every football person that I talked to around the league said the Giants had done a terrific job of plugging all of their holes. This is a team that had made the playoffs, had plugged their holes, and should have been primed to perform much, much better. Now, we knew the schedule was tougher. We knew that. And it was going to require them to pick it up a notch if they were going to maintain their trajectory. We all knew that. But because of the way that Joe Schoen had dealt with the offseason, every intelligent football guy around the league said, hey, I think they're up for that challenge. And what happened? Lightning struck in 25 places and destroyed the season. And now everybody's like, oh, the Giants aren't very good. They might have to rebuild and do everything else. Because nobody cares about how good the plan was. They care about the results regardless of the circumstances. So I warn you not to get too caught up in the plan, because no matter how good it looks, there is always something else that could throw it awry.
Well, the facts are there. I see the offensive line might not have only got rid of Barkley not getting that together. If they don't get together, Daniel Jones, it didn't help him the last few years with the injuries and everything. He might be the next one out the door. Now, I did hear Runyon. They were talking about him that when he was with Green Bay early, they had him on the left side, and he really rated out well, a lot better.
Right.
And then due to injuries and stuff like that, they had to switch him to the right side, so
yes.
he's back and forth. So,
yeah.
But when the Eagles signed Barkley, it was like a dagger going in my heart. Oh my Lord, you know. But that's what happens.
That's
now,
the business.
Right, and I understand all that, like you said, and you can't blame them guys. Like I said, it could have turned out all different if it wasn't for the offensive line. Now,
well, I mean, Joe, the other thing that I think you're overlooking is you had a new general manager come in. And when you have a new general manager come in, you can't guarantee that they automatically want to invest in the players that were previously drafted. So keep that in mind, too.
Well, Joe wanted him back, though.
No,
he did want him back.
I'm not saying that Joe Schoen didn't like Barkley, but whenever there's a new front office, they are not tied to those players they did not draft. I think that's been seen across the league.
I know, but I think that's very overplayed.
Well, what I'm saying again, the culprit was the offensive line. Maybe we wouldn't have new general managers.
You know what, Joe?
You're talking about a million different things. Sure.
Joe, the real culprit in Barkley's value was the injuries more than anything else. Because had Barkley been healthy for his entire Giants career, regardless of what the offensive line had done, I think things would have been different. But the injuries dramatically reduced his market value at 27 years old.
Okay, now that's going to be a big question for the Eagles. I have to look at.
They forked it over.
Yeah,
that's their problem
risk
now.
Involved. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, before you cut me off, I have to go. You were talking about not taking a quarterback, but I really think they have to really look at it if something pops their way, because next year a quarterback might not be available, or they might have to jump up and pay a big, steep price. Now, because if Daniel Jones don't work out, and he has a very big cap hit next year, and then we have to pay Burns. Now, what I'm saying here, this year, do you guys think that so far with what we got in free agency and that we got losing Barkley and our safety, you still think we're going to get them number 3s for them?
Well, I lost you. What are you
He's
talking
about the compensation formula.
Compensation.
Well,
you still think
the Joe.
That formula.
I know it goes by a system.
But here's the problem: we're not done yet.
Yeah,
you got to get done with the whole free agency period.
I understand if it stays, it's pretty close to done, Paul, because we spend all our money unless we're going to allocate more. Fix and things like that. We spent the most so far in free agency, over $150,000 or so. So we ain't going to spend that big much anymore. You know that. I'm just saying now, the way
Joe,
we are.
But the problem is, Joe, you can't tell me, and I can't tell you what the exact formula is.
Well, I'm just saying. So, do you think that like Runyon and these other deals would mess up them 3s so far?
I mean, it depends on production, too. You got Barkley and McKinney. I mean, they factor in a lot of different things, and they don't reveal that publicly. So it's hard to give you. I wouldn't, Joe, let's put it this way. Can you get through the 2024 season before you worry about your 2025 picks? You know what I'm saying?
Now,
I mean,
everything's tied in because them number 3s there, if we want a quarterback, hey, they said Fields might go just for a number 3 if the Bears are going to deal him later or so. So we have the 3. Well, that's all I'm saying.
It's possible, but Justin Fields would be, though, traded potentially before this year's draft, and he wouldn't be around for next year anyway. So it's irrelevant how many 3s you have.
I'm not sure he would, because they need somebody there. I'm not sure they'd get rid of him right away.
Listen, Joe, I understand you want to speculate, but the Bears could hold on to him. They have Tyson Bagent, though, also on the roster, who showed some flashes last season. The point is, if Fields gets moved, I would say the chances are high that it could be this year if they determine they want to take a quarterback. They could keep him as a backup, but if there's going to be a move, it would make sense after the dust settles with all these free agents that Fields gets moved this year, that in all likelihood, you're not really going to be thinking about trading a third-round pick for Fields next year. So that's something that you got to take into consideration. I wouldn't get too caught up in 2025 picks.
Over the cap tries to estimate this stuff as it's happening. They're saying, based on the reported signings, the Giants have added Locke, Runyon, Illuminor, and Singletary. Remember, not everybody qualifies. Street free agents don't qualify for this formula. So 4. The 4 that would qualify as the Giants losing are McKinney, Barkley, Taylor, and Ashawn Robinson. The net value of those contracts is heavier than the net value of the 4 the Giants have signed. So yes, Joe, to your question, at the moment the scale bounces in the Giants' favor. There will be some type of compensatory picks probably coming to the Giants based on what's happened so far. That doesn't mean it can't change.
That's what I'm saying. It's
because
fluid.
Free agency is still open. But yes, as of now, the scale will balance in the Giants' favor, and they'll get something back. Whatever it is, it's still fluid.
Yeah,
but they'll get right now. They're ahead of the curve. If that's what you wanted to know, Joe, they're ahead of the curve.
But what that means is impossible to determine.
Impossible to determine.
I mean, it can mean a 4th. It can mean a 5th.
Exactly.
Who knows at this point?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they got to utilize the resources they have to
there's a whole
tackle
season to play
2024
this
first.
fall. Why are you worried about next year's compensatories?
I'm with you. I mean,
man, Joe, come on, relax.
We didn't even finish.
Go have a pizza, will you, please?
Of the 2024 offseason. Already we're talking about the 2025 draft.
Man.
Coach Marvin's on the line here on BBKL. What's happening, Coach Marvin? What do you got?
How you doing, Paul and Lance?
Doing all right.
I'm stressed out. I'm stressed out, Coach. Help me here.
I hear you. But you may everything's not going to be correct. But he made some good points. But then he go too far. Compensatory. I don't even think of those picks at all. I don't even worry about them. What you should have just said is you didn't know when you started talking and saying, well, it goes.
We try to help everybody.
Well, that's what
Coach.
we're saying. We're saying we don't have a definitive answer.
But
that's the honest truth.
We try to help. We try to explain as much as we can. We try.
Right.
We try.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to throw your cards in it.
Okay.
I've seen this game before and kind of like said, no, we're not going to go there.
What do you got? What do you got for us?
Well, real quick, the first caller made some excellent points, but they're all a good points. But everybody has their own. He was saying some things. I agree with 90% of it, but he's talking about Barkley. That was a wrong. I don't agree with that. When they picked Barkley, they had Odell was here, Manning was here. They were working the line, so they figured that's what was going to work for them.
Absolutely.
No question. They also looked at him as a weapon too, not just a conventional running back. So
exactly.
That's the other thing.
They didn't make that pick and say, "Oh, that was totally wrong." You want to say something totally wrong? Pick somebody that's a 5th-round pick. Guy's a 5th-round rating, and bring him up and pick him too.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
Definitely wrong. You don't know if they're wrong until they start playing. And I think Lance or one of you said that. You don't know anything until they start playing. You don't know how the plan's going to go until you start playing. Because when you build a team, you build it in your mind how you think it's going to go. It always ain't going to go that way. Somebody get hurt, somebody don't perform, turnovers, penalties, all these things you don't account for when you start putting these teams together. So,
well, here's another quick example, by the way, which is interesting. Dave Gettleman also drafted Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. And then the next GM that came in traded him to San Francisco. So the next GM that came in here parted ways, and understandable, Saquon hit the market and got a lucrative deal, but you're going to tell me the Panthers and the Giants both didn't say to themselves when they drafted Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley that they were going to be weapons? Of course they did. Unfortunately, because of injuries, because of offensive line play, they weren't able to truly maximize the value where it translated to wins. So the next general manager comes in and redefines the resources. Very similar results.
Right. And it's down to, and I'm seeing it now because I was upset yesterday, Monday. Not upset, but I was disappointed. I had that Odell Beckham feeling again watching Barkley. And living in Delaware, I get Philadelphia news, and you know who's the top of the news. It's Barkley. I'm a good friend with Yasin Carmichael. I told you before. He's the nephew of Harold Carmichael. Monday, he calls me about that move. And I had to talk to him about it. And my thing was, what's disappointing, I was saying at the time, what was disappointing, I was like, I'm looking at the Cowboys, I'm looking at the Eagles, how those organizations continuously in the 2000s have built their roster and they're staying competitive. They're not winning championships every year because it's hard to do, but they competitive rosters they have, and they're making moves, and I feel like we're standing still while they're making moves until they made the move for Brian
Burns.
Brian Burns. Then I felt a little better. I said, okay. And now what I'm starting to feel, I don't know, but I'm starting to feel, Joe is saying, you know what? I'm going to put my fingerprint on this team. And what he's saying is, and I listened to Charlie Weiss, and I listened to Pat Curran. They hit it on the nose. And what it's saying is that the dollar amount was just too much for them for what they wanted to do. And so they're allocating that money into the offensive line and into the defensive side of the ball, and especially the defensive line. Mm-hmm. And they're working those two. They let Barkley go. I'm still a little hurt, but I'm not as hurt as much because I can see them what they trying to build. And Pat Curran, I agree with him because I was thinking this. He's saying they do need a quarterback, and I agree with you too, Paul. I won't do it at 6. I can stand fast at 6. Take one of the 2 receivers.
Yep.
That's what I see. Take one of the 2 receivers, and then work your way down what you want to do from that point.
Yeah, because the explosive number 1 receiver, the X receiver specifically, can make a big difference on this team. That's a quick impact, which could just lift. What do they say? A high tide lifts all boats, right?
Right. You're talking to the lift. Your 2 receivers you have, Hyatt and Wandell. Mm-hmm. You can lift those guys' confidence because you're going to open up things for them. And you can, and then as far as the quarterback go, he liked the Penix, and I still like Penix. If you can get him in the second round, Penix to me, I'm not going to get him. I'm not taking these guys at number 6. I'm not taking JJ at number 6 because I feel I'm going to repeat the Daniel Jones situation. Because yesterday I went back and started looking at all the articles on everyone on their ratings of the Daniel Jones draft. And I started thinking about this show you guys are doing. Did any of us talk about Daniel Jones at that time? We didn't. And they had him rated in the top 20, but they didn't have him rated in the top 10. Okay, he liked him. I support him. He got a giant uniform. I'm not going to talk bad about him. I'm going to support Daniel Jones. But I also have to support the Giants and say, hey, if I can get another quarterback somewhere reasonable and without killing myself, I'm going to do it. The only way I would move up if one of the top 2 quarterbacks fall, not the 3, just the 2.
Well, and they also have to love both of those guys, though, keep in mind.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if you really want the guy, then the safest bet is you move up to number 1. And then you don't have to worry about anything because you know you're going to get the guy that you want. If you're going to make a move, you do that, and you could do that before the draft even starts because then you don't have to worry. If you're thinking about moving up, anything short of 1, you got to wait and see how things develop in the draft.
But we did trade away one of our 2s. I don't know how much ammunition I'm willing to give up to do that. These guys they'll figure that out, but I don't know what that amount is.
Coach, to me, the tradable ammunition just went in the Brian Burns deal.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
as far as I'm concerned, that's it. That was, if you had any thoughts, and there are people out there who still think the Giants should have traded up into the top 3, that was never on my plate. Now, I understand it was always a possibility. Anything's possible. But I would never have advised that. And now that they've traded a 2, and I know the 5 is actually for next year, but now that they've done that was the big splash trade. And they got a pass rusher to do it.
Right. And that's where I'm going. I said, I don't know what the value to move up. I don't want to give up a lot of access to move up to get one of those guys. I don't want to do that because they might ask for everything you got.
Oh, well, sure.
And I don't want to do that. I got to still build a team. So if I can fall back to the second round, maybe get enough and see what somebody says. If I can draft back into the bottom of the first round, maybe. That's a maybe. I'm not saying do that. That's a maybe if that's what you're thinking. Or you're going to have to sit in the second round. One of the quarterbacks fall to you, then you take them. If it don't, then you move on and do what you can or go Paul's way.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it also depends, and Coach Martin, appreciate the phone call. It also depends on how they feel about Drew Lock, too. We were talking about that earlier in the show. I don't think the addition of Lock, considering it's a 1-year deal, drastically changes things, but maybe in their mind they say, hey, if we have to choose between Locke and drafting a quarterback in the 4th round, we'll just hang on to Locke. And if Locke gets some opportunities, he impresses in practice, we'll re-sign him, and he could be that guy that we could still develop. Keep in mind, when the Seahawks made the deal with Denver for Russell Wilson, John Schneider, Russell had a no-trade clause, so he limited their options. But Schneider, the other reason why they wanted to send Russell Wilson to Denver is Schneider wanted Drew Lock in return. That was the quarterback that he was very high on, that he wanted in-house with Geno Smith. So other teams have seen upside with Drew Lock. I don't know what the Giants think of Drew Lock beyond one season. But if you start saying you're going to look at a quarterback in the middle of the rounds, Drew Lock's not an old man. So I think you can compare Drew Lock with more experience to taking a flyer on a guy in the middle rounds. And if there's not much difference, you could stay pat with Drew Lock. If you want a little bit more upside, though, Paul, that's when I think you got to maybe make a move to be a little bit more aggressive.
I don't see that happening.
No, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I do think that there's a separation in terms of the school of thought there.
I think, Coach Marvin, who understands the game extremely well, made a slew of good points. And, the fact that they made their big splash deal to get the edge rusher, I just don't see how that gives them any leeway to make another splash move for a quarterback.
Well, you probably have to use future assets.
And Joe Schoen does not seem to be the kind of guy who wants to do that. He doesn't. There are some GMs who are very quick to grab the credit card and either push cap money down the road or draft picks. Get rid of like the Rams did when they went to the Super Bowl.
Sure.
And they traded a slew of future draft picks for now. That doesn't seem to be the way Joe Schoen wants to operate. I don't get that opinion of him, that he's a credit card guy. So to me, I think it's virtually impossible unless you just really mortgage a big chunk of change on a credit card, far beyond what anybody would determine as rational after he just made the trade that he made for Burns. I think that's it. That's his splash.
I'm bringing up just out of curiosity because Shane was there when they made the trade for Josh Allen, and they had to move up for him. So they gave up in that trade. They swapped first-rounders, of course. There were 2 second-round picks that also were sacrificed. Now, they just got rid of a second-round pick for Burns. So you have one less second-round pick to move. But once again, you can use future picks, too. It doesn't always have to be 2024 assets. But just to give you an idea, he was there when they moved up. The additional sacrifice was a pair of second-rounders.
It's going to take more than that to move up into the top
I agree.
Of this draft.
Yeah, because that wasn't moving up to number 1
and again,
or number 2,
remember
of course.
something, and I stressed this on a show last week. Joe Schoen said time and time again how important it was he had 4 premium picks in the first 70 of this draft. Now he's only got 3. When he continued to hammer that point home about 4 premium picks, you know how much he valued those, how much it hurt him like a gut punch to even trade one of those. But he did it to get the edge rusher, who he clearly believed was a significant need on this team, and he was willing to take the plunge to do it. And by the way, about Burns, the thing about Burns, they now have a Batman and Robin, with Thibodeau and Burns. If you had waited, for those who say, because they traded the 2 and they traded a 5, which is really what they got in terms of price range for Leonard Williams, all right? Burns being a more dangerous outside edge rusher, plays a different position, but he's also younger.
Yep.
Right? So
coming off a rookie deal.
That seems like, in terms of compensation, that's a really good deal for the Giants. Okay? Now you say, well, but now they also got to give him a contract. Well, here's the thing. Let's say you, in all honesty, truly believed that you were going to try to sign Burns at the end of the season because he was going to be free. Let's just say you wanted to do that. Chances are you were going to probably pay more than what you paid for that contract now.
That's also assuming he does hit the market, too. Carolina could have traded him elsewhere.
Correct.
And then he doesn't.
And then you never get a shot at him. But if you want to go purchase a potential double-digit sack pass rusher, what do you think the market is for those guys? And do you really think it's going to go down?
No, well, I think the reason why.
not.
Interestingly, you bring up this topic, I would say the reason why Carolina did not get a first-round pick is because teams said to themselves, we have to work out a new deal with Brian Burns.
Oh, and that's a discouraging thing for a lot of folks.
Oh, it's significant.
You
Because
know?
you would say a team is more willing to give up a higher pick if they say, we're acquiring a guy that's on the books.
He's uncertainty.
For several years.
No question.
Yeah.
But see, Joe Shade said to himself, look, if we really need to go out and get a pass rusher, we are going to have to pay through the wazoo. You're going to have to pay at least the cash that you gave Burns in this extension, if not more, if you have to go onto the open market and get a guy who has that type of pass rush ability, who is young and who is healthy. It's going to cost you at least that much, if not more, in terms of cash outlay. So, no, I think the deal is a really smart deal for Joe. I will also say this. I would have preferred that Burns had more than one double-digit sack season in his 4-year career. He's gone to 2 Pro Bowls,
Yep.
but he's only had 12.5 sacks once. All the other years he was under 10. The thinking is that there's a very strong possibility he's got more 10-sack plus seasons left in him. That he's only now getting to his prime, and he's only now reaching the zenith of what he could be. So, and as the case with all pass rushers, you always have to overpay. There's an overpay premium on every pass rusher. Guys who get 8 sacks, you got to pay them like they get 10. You just do. That's the way it is.
Well, Danielle Hunter, who just signed with the Texans, is older than Brian Burns, has many more double-digit sack seasons, had a career year in 2023, 16 and a half. Houston gives him a 2-year deal reportedly worth $49 million. It could go as high as 51. I mean, do the math. I mean, that's about $25 million per year in average annual salary. And Hunter is older. He's got more mileage than Brian Burns.
Exactly.
So if that's what Hunter is going for at this stage in his career, you can only imagine what a younger guy who was set to be a free agent.
And you
is gonna
believe
cost
has
you.
ups.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of the market. The other thing, by the way, before we wrap up here about the running back position.
Yeah, we're really long.
We're okay. We're 4 minutes over. Trust me, we've gone much longer in the past. I think the reason why running backs are getting a little bit more money overall than last year, I don't think teams value this draft class as high as they did last season. And I think they say to themselves, if we can't get a playmaker in the draft, we'll spend a little bit more money. And that perhaps helped a guy like Saquon Barkley, because what's the old story, Paul? If the smaller deals all go up, then the guy at the top who could cash in,
Right.
he'll benefit as well. I think that perhaps played a role. Well, that is going to wrap up Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, as well as the mobile app. A reminder that you could check out the show of today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcasts. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest. We'll speak to you on Thursday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.